So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down 3 major sources of exploitation in different ways who exploited Maddie during her rise to fame. So first, we're going to look at the producers of Dance Moms who didn't just document her life, but they actively manipulated it from like 8 or 9 years onward. Like, we're going to talk the engineering of narratives, pushing pressure onto Maddie's shoulders, and the crafting of a version of Maddie that the world was meant to consume. Then we're going to dive into Abby Lee Miller, of course, who we have covered at length on this channel, whose fixations and favoritism and extreme coaching styles turned Maddie into what Abby saw as her protege, but also her pawn. And protege in the sense of like a culmination of all of Abby's teachings and what she is able to give to a child, versus protege in terms of like her creating a mini-me of herself in Gianna. And then finally, we're going to explore the unsettling chapter of Maddie and Sia's relationship, which was like a partnership that began as an opportunity and seemed like it was going to be great and emotionally supportive, but it transformed into like a codependency and ultimately placed Maddie at the center of one of the most controversial creative projects of the last decade. So this isn't just a video about dance, and this isn't a video just about power or victimhood. It's about the adults who shaped Maddie's childhood, the decisions made for her and on her behalf, and the long-term consequences that she's still navigating today because of it. So let's get into it. Let's talk about how the producers of Dance Moms really created and reinforced the Golden Girl narrative. And we'll get into what Abby did in that regard later, but let's just talk about the producers exclusively for now. So multiple cast members, including Maddie herself, have said that the producers heavily leaned into Maddie as like the star child of that group. They created storylines that were structured around her being perfect and untouchable, or like the best dancer in all of America. And this added pressure and forced her into a role that she couldn't escape. She had no choice other than to be perfect, which we saw on the show. And we saw how that pressure gave her like crying anxiety fits, or how she absolutely broke down when she forgot her choreography on the show. And it relatively served the plot line of the show in a positive way to do this, but it definitely didn't serve her well-being. And she's gone on to go to therapy, and she's been working this out for years, but that's the main thing that she's been trying to learn, is to let go of the perfectionism, she said. And then, of course, we've got the filming of all of their emotional, distressful moments, and then amplifying it with a storyline. So the show would always show her crying. Anytime that they got her crying on camera, I'm sure that that made it to the final cut for the show. Like, they needed that emotionally suspenseful stuff, so they kept all of that material and made a storyline around it. They showed all of her anxiety. They showed all of her habits around her perfection. You can see her, like, chewing on her fingers and chewing on her nails. You can hear her talking about all of the perfection and how, or perfectionism rather, and how that affected her throughout the show as well. And like with all of her opportunities off the show too. And then we've got like all these clips of Abby yelling at her and all of the stress around solos, especially particularly because Maddie had a totally different standard than the rest of the girls. It wasn't just about placing for Maddie. She had to be the #1 winner of the entire competition, and also win at nationals, and also win absolutely everywhere. So production chose to keep those moments and to reinforce like the pressure for her to be perfect. Regardless of what Abby was doing, production leaned heavily into that as well. Then, of course, we have the manufacturing of the Maddie versus Chloe rivalry, because, again, we can only put so much of the weight on Abby when it comes to Dance Moms. Like, yes, there's Abby as a person, and there's Abby's, like, narcissistic qualities, and there's the way that she emotionally manipulates and abuses people, quite honestly. But there's also the added storyline elements of Dance Moms that aren't entirely just up to Abby, and they're things that Abby had to lean into because that was her job. So this has also been confirmed about production leaning into the Maddie-Chloe rivalry by Chloe herself and Christy, her mom, and Maddie, and even Abby herself. And producers definitely like heightened the competition by repeatedly comparing their scores, highlighting any small tension between them. Of course, we had the whole episode where they both had to perform the same solo, and then the judge came back and said that the scores were wrong because Chloe got like a 28 or something in a category that only had 25. And then they ask how Abby figured this out, and she says, oh, the judges brought it to me. And then the judge comes back and he's like, oh, thank you for bringing this to our attention. So the show made it look like Abby went and talked to the judges and had the scores changed. I don't know what the real story is there, but obviously the show really leaned into that. And then, like, the interview questions, like pushing the jealousy and like fear narratives, asking them questions around that, or like editing a normal conversation to make it look a lot more dramatic. We also have all of the leading interviews, like when the kids were in season 1, all of the interviews, or at least a lot of the interview moments, were scripted, and the kids had to like say what the producers wanted them to say before they were allowed to leave the room. There was definitely a lot going on in the interviews. Like, they had the leading questions, they had them actually be scripted. Then there's like the emotional trigger questions that they would ask. And keep in mind, Maddie was as young as 8 years old when she started the show, and they're intentionally trying to emotionally trigger little children. And then obviously the prompts about like, oh, are you jealous of this person winning? Or are you jealous of Chloe getting the Lux music video, for example? And they leaned into all of those different narratives. Now, not all of the editing and the production was capturing Maddie's like emotionally triggered moments. I would say a majority of what we saw on the show was actually them capturing her best moments and editing all of the other dancers to show their worst moments, and editing Maddie to only show her perfect moments and her best moments throughout the entire series, with exception for when it served the plot and the narrative of the show for her to like forget her solo, for example, or for her music to skip. But all the rest of the time, like, the girls are performing twice, and they're using every single flaw and mishap during their solos and their duets and their group number to put into the final cut, so it looks like they're making mistakes all over the place, and then they're using Maddie's performances and they're putting only the best cuts to make it look like Maddie was perfect every time that she performed. So that's how they definitely manipulated behind the scenes, but that has a huge impact on Maddie herself. Like, they also cut lines so they could change the narrative and make it look like Maddie was being more of a brat, or that Maddie was gloating or being arrogant, or things like that, that she was coming across rude. They changed reactions by cutting and pasting clips. They, like I said, hid her mistakes, and they amplified her successes, or like even right from the beginning, they made her out to be like the best dancer in all of America. Sure, that makes you the star, but that's also a ton of pressure to put on a kid, especially when they didn't earn that title first. She didn't earn being the best dancer in all of America. A TV show said that she was that, and then she had to try and live up to that expectation while the public was watching her. Then another thing with the editing, we also have to talk about like maybe staged competitions, even if they were real. And the show made it look like Maddie won every single competition, or pretty much every single competition. Maddie did not win every single competition. Like, they highlighted all of her wins and they skipped past her losses, and in order to portray her as unbeatable. Or a lot of the time she would place first in a category, but then she wouldn't place first overall. So they would only show the judging of her placing first in a category to make it look like she's still untouchable and she's the best, but then they wouldn't show the other categories and the overall placements, or they would show another dancer winning first in the overalls, or like they did things like cutting entire other people's solos who placed first or tied first, like Kalani's Fragile Forest solo that was completely cut from the show, or like not allowing Maddie to compete against Kalani because that was the only dancer on the team who would probably beat her at competition. So there was definitely all of that. Like, Maddie was protected in terms of her reputation, but who is that really protecting? It was really protecting the show and the lifeline, the vitality of the show, while amplifying the pressure on Maddie to continue to perform. And then, of course, producers obviously egged on Abby to be even harder on Maddie. They egged on Abby to create conflicts. They egged on Abby to do, like, the scene with all of the tiaras and, like, to make the other children jealous. Like, they were constantly egging on a lot of that. It wasn't all just from Abby. So those are just a few of the ways that I think that the producers were manipulative on Dance Moms. But let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below, because there is 1,000 other reasons that I could list in this video. But I also have to cover all of Abby's manipulation and exploitation in this video, as well as Sia, who I originally thought was going to be like a guardian angel for her. But Apparently not. Now, love her or hate her, Abby's a name you can't ignore if you've ever seen a dance show, especially Dance Mom. On one hand, she's the drill sergeant of dance. She pushes her students to be their absolute best, you could say, producing champions who can leap higher than my self-esteem on a good day. But on the other hand, her teaching methods, well, they've been called questionable to say the least. There's yelling, tears, and more drama than a soap opera marathon. Let's not forget about her infamous pyramid rankings. Imagine being a kid and having your week decided by where your headshot lands on a whiteboard. Yikes.
Always, Maddie the favorite. People asked me about that all the time, and it was very simple. She was the favorite because her mother went and got her out of school during the day and brought her when there were no cameras, no producers, no director, no sound guys, and we could work with her. And she could learn her solo ahead of time. She loved the dance studio. It was her home away from home. She could learn part of the group dance ahead of time. And she was a good student. She wanted to be there. Her parents were going through a really ugly divorce, and that was a safe haven. That was a place where everybody knew her name. She was little and petite and tiny and cute as a button. And the older kids would always pick her up and play with her. And, they were sweet to her, and she loved that. You three are doing solos. I don't want anyone on this team that is not a first place winner. Maddie, you didn't win. Your sister beat you, so you failed. It doesn't look good for the studio.
You don't want anybody on this team that is not a first place winner. Okay, well then you should probably create first place winning dancers, give them first place winning choreographies, and don't put the onus on the children when you are the one that is supposed to be creating winning dancers. So you're saying that you pitted up two sisters against each other in the same age division, and you told them both that they need to win, but then when one of them actually won, you're going to tell the other that they failed. So you're triangulating these children against each other, which is an emotional manipulation tactic, and you're telling Maddie that it looks bad for the studio that her younger sister beat her. Shouldn't it look great for your studio that an even younger dancer is able to win in that age division at competition? But again, we're just going to use this to manipulate the dancers and to see the negative, of course, because we are Abigail Miller. You should never be putting the onus on a child to be the one that is representing your business or putting your business in a great light. This is your business. This is your onus as an adult that has decided to become a business owner. That is not up to the child, and the onus and the stress should never be placed on a child to be taking the burden of whether your business looks good or whether your business looks successful when they have zero control over your actions, and they're a child. Everybody is well aware that Abby is able to give constructive dance technical corrections, and she's able to facilitate a studio that is full of people that are great at training children and have the wherewithal and the education to do so. If anything is making her business look bad, it is herself.
Even Maddie hasn't won first place yet.
How many people are sitting on a yoga ball every morning? Get off your butt, walk over to Ross, and buy a ball. That's your fault.
I think it's really hypocritical for Abby Lee Miller, out of anybody, to be telling people to get off their butt and go do anything when she sits on her butt and choreographs a group of children that are amongst the top 1 percentile of the most active children in North America. But no, of course, gaslight these children into telling them that they're lazy. But on top of that, how wildly inappropriate to tell a 12-year-old to get off their butt and go by themselves in downtown LA to Ross to go buy a ball. A 12-year-old should not be doing anything by themselves in downtown LA.
Why were you in your car last night crying?
I was crying because I feel like this is like my home.
Okay, for one, she's talking to Maddie as if this is some horrible, horrible breakup that she is going through with her husband. She is acting as if she has been emotionally traumatized and berated by this 9-year-old child, when in fact she's just using these big puppy dog tears in order to manipulate a child when she is a grown woman. Also, I find it wildly inappropriate that she continues to try and groom children into thinking that her, as a dance teacher, should have more liberty, and she should be the one that these children are listening to over their own parents.
Why did you get out of the car and go? No, I'm going in there.
No solo. Think about what you've done.
And absolutely in no occasion should a 9-year-old disobey their parents to get out of the vehicle and go inside a dance studio or choose their dance teacher over somebody that is their legal guardian. That is absolutely wildly inappropriate to be telling a child that they should be listening to anybody over the voice of their own legal guardian and biological parent.
I just wanted Miss Abby to understand that, like, I love to dance and I think I want it more than anyone else.
Abby Lee Miller is a dance teacher. There is a time and place. A dance teacher's job is to teach children how to dance. Part of the job is imparting your wisdom and your life experience to the students in a helpful and productive way, not by telling them to disobey their own guardians. Every time I listen to Abby Lee Miller, it feels as if her emotional intelligence is about that of a 9-year-old.
That woman walked in here. You should have seen your face. You went like this. You cannot show that emotion. It makes you look bad.
So this little 8 or 9-year-old should not show any emotion because it makes them look bad as an 8 or 9-year-old to show emotion.
I know that it's never going to happen for you. I don't want you to turn out like that. You have too bright of a future.
On top of that, you're going to tell a child who needs to feel camaraderie and acceptance within their group will never be happy for them in order to manipulate them into performing their best and only listening to you, in order to isolate them into being your golden child and only listening to you as the narcissist. You are going to triangulate this child against every other adult in the room so that they only take your voice as the voice of reason. That's absolutely disgusting considering you don't have the well-being of the child in your best interest. I absolutely hate that advice when it comes to giving children the advice that you need to just put on a smile and act like nothing matters because that is what you have to do as a leader in the room. No. I personally feel this is what leads to not being able to express your emotions in a healthy manner. This is the kind of advice that leads people to dissociate from what they're actually feeling and to project a false image, which is kind of the foundation of narcissism. So I'm not really surprised to hear this advice being given by a raging narcissist.
I want to talk to you. Very proud of you. You have carried these groups. The Maddie that has given up all her school friends, doing what you're supposed to be doing.
Just shoving it in her face. You're the kid that gave up their entire childhood. They gave up all of their friends. They gave up their school for me. Remember how much you've invested of your own life into this and why this is so important. You're talking to a 9-year-old, not an Olympian. I noticed that Abby's coaching is always focused on the end goal, but she always treats the children as if they are already at the end goal. For example, she's talking to people as if they are sophisticated adults with a fully formed brain that are able to take this information and decipher it with a mature adult brain and not from the point of a malleable 9-year-old child who is going to take this information as a lot more black and white because it is coming from somebody that they look up to as their mentor. This is why you need to be incredibly careful with the words that you choose when you're speaking to children specifically.
You have the opportunity to go up against this girl. Is it going to be enough?
It was my fault. Totally my fault.
It's not your fault. It's her dance bag. Well,
I should have checked.
I don't want Maddie to make mistakes.
Okay. Oh my God. So I get the point. When it comes to bringing your belongings to a dance class, it is always great to instill the onus upon the child that it is them getting themselves to the dance class and they should be in charge of getting their own belongings. Now, of course, that is great to instill that message into a 9-year-old, but that is with the hopes that this 9-year-old child is going to eventually become independent. When it comes to the reality, though, is these are 8 and 9-year-old girls. Of course, the mother is going to oversee the actions of her 8 and 9-year-old children because that is what a mother does, and if she were to not do that, that would be neglectful parenting. And I feel like Melissa is very justified in saying, don't take this out on my child. I forgot to check her stuff to see if she had it. And I think that Abby is kind of justified in saying the onus should be on a child, but saying, I don't want Maddie to be making mistakes. Okay, well, Maddie is a human just like you, and you can't be projecting onto a child that they shouldn't be making mistakes or being human. That's entirely unfair and doesn't provide them any wiggle room to grow or to exist.
And when you get here,
No one's perfect.
there's kids that are living here that are 14 and 15 years old on their own, paying their own bills. You can't call mommy. It's your responsibility, not your mother's.
That being said, she always makes these absolutely outlandish claims. There are no 13 and 14-year-olds that are living at a ballet company full-time and paying for their own bills. You're not paying for your own bills if you are 13 and 14 years old. You are living under the strict supervision of your teachers when you go to a ballet school. This also is putting out a horrible message for people that are considering sending their children out to a ballet boarding school. You are under very strict supervision the entire time. You have guardians the entire time. It is not just a bunch of children living as a free-for-all in dormitories at 13 and 14 years old.
Maddie is such a perfectionist, and she's hard on herself.
This is about your kid having an audition tomorrow and her brain not being in her head. She's not focused on the routine. Mackenzie and Maddie left their bags in the lobby of the hotel. Now, what are we gonna do? That the more your kid is on the ball, the more people expect. And that's sad, but that's the truth.
Also drives me nuts when people don't have the empathy to witness somebody's body language and to actually take that in. Like, we always see Maddie under what I would say duress. She's stressed out. She's constantly fidgeting with her hands. This tells me that her stress levels are high, that her anxiety levels are high. And on top of that, when she's already experiencing these moments where she's like stimming from this stress, then Abby will come in on top of that and give her a bunch of demands and manipulate her emotionally. That is absolutely not the time when a child needs to be dogpiled with more and more and more pressure. That is when a child needs to be sat down and calmed down and explained to them that it really doesn't matter. All of this stuff is all about the coaching and all about helping them become a better dancer. But at the end of the day, if they win first place or not, is not the end of the world.
Maddie and Abby are 36 years apart in age, and they first met when Maddie began dance classes at Abby's studio when she was 2. On the show, Abby didn't even try to hide her blatant favoritism towards Maddie. She referred to the Ziegler girls as being her daughters, and Melissa even encouraged this, saying on multiple occasions that she shares her daughters with Abby. In fact, when Abby's mother passed away, Maddie posted on Instagram saying that she was the grandmother she never had. Maddie even wrote the introduction to Abby's book, revealing that she sought her approval constantly. She says, "After my performances, she is the first person I look for. She tells me what was good and what I still need to work on. I'm not afraid of her critique. I need to hear the truth." It's very sad to see in hindsight how desperate Maddie was for Abby's approval when she was younger.
This makes me especially sad and especially perturbed because a child's emotional existence and their self-worth should not be relying entirely on the emotional state and the opinion of somebody else, especially when that somebody else is a dance teacher who has intentionally groomed that child to have their emotional state be reliant and feed directly off of the narcissist, in which this case it being Abby. Narcissists need a constant supply or a constant fuel for validation, and in this case, Abby has clearly groomed Maddie to be that fuel for validation, which is why she projects all of her insecurities onto Maddie and expects Maddie to be the one to make her look good, to be a first place winning dancer, to make her business successful, to make sure that she thrives financially. All of this is projected onto a child in which she is using as a form of supply. On the flip side of that, Maddie, an empathic child, is being groomed so that she is emotionally reliant on the narcissist, creating this codependent bond which is incredibly unhealthy and is entirely orchestrated by Abby Lee Miller.
And it's equally sad to see how desperate Abby was to be in control of Maddie and her career. She was constantly putting Maddie on a pedestal in public, sticking her nose in Maddie's projects when they weren't her business, and using Maddie to promote her studio, which she still does to this day. Many fans have noticed some of the cruel and creepy tactics used by Abby to maintain control in their relationship. Several notable moments from the show include when Abby forcefully kissed Maddie in front of millions, when she would tell Maddie that her friends didn't really care about her, or when she told Maddie that she should have disobeyed her mother and come to dance class because Abby felt that she deserved better. Maddie says she is glad to have moved on from the show and Abby, because the environment made her overly stressed. Abby, on the other hand, continues to accuse Melissa of smuggling money from Australia into the US, and she's also mocked Maddie's photographs in her series Ask Abby.
I even had to bring her crowns in because I want her to realize that this is something to be proud of. It's a huge accomplishment. I need the girls to come in. I need everybody to come in, but I need you to get your crowns and get them on that table.
And now there's the lovely moment of Abby making Maddie bring in all of her crowns and rub it in the faces of all of the other students on the team, all of the different competitions that she has won, because she is, of course, Abby's golden child that has been orchestrated and conditioned and given all of the opportunities to win against all of these children. Naturally, Maddie is incredibly uncomfortable and doesn't want to do this, but of course, Maddie's emotions are not considered, and this is all another orchestration by Abby Lee Miller to make a group of children feel bad about themselves and to put her Maddie, her golden child that she has created, above the other children in order to have emotional leverage on them. This is always about emotional leverage over somebody, and that is what Abby is all about, and that is what Abby prides herself on. She says that she can make a child cry in like 3 seconds if she wants to, and I think that that's something that's absolutely disgusting to boast about, and why would you be proud of that? Why would you even try to do that? I hope that makes you feel big and strong and mighty. The rest of the world thinks that's pretty pathetic.
Own it. Be proud. Rub it in their faces if you have to.
Okay, you had me there. Own it. Okay, be proud. Yep. Rub it in their faces if you have to. That is absolutely not the same thing as being proud and owning it.
I didn't want to show all the crowns to the girls, but I followed the rules and I did it. But then the moms kind of got mad, and I didn't like that at all.
You can be proud of something, and if you feel like you don't need to bring it up or rub it in somebody else's face, you don't have to. And clearly this child doesn't have the natural reaction to rub anything in anybody's face. For most people, that would make them feel like a disgusting human being. So I don't know why she's giving that kind of advice to a child.
Starting competing when I was 5, and so that was already intense enough, and then growing up on a reality show competing was very stressful. And I had so many experiences to pull from that to bring in because it's very harsh. And when I was younger, even 9 years old, I was way more stressed than I am now. And I've realized that winning a trophy literally means nothing. And I have not used any of them. I think I threw all of them away because I'm like, I thought it meant everything to me. But now I'm like, I never needed those.
Damn, it feels good to be a gangster.
I don't know. I think Gianna and I don't want to speak for Gianna, but I think we're very confused by it all because we were kind to her. We were good to that kid. She did get the good music. She did get the good costume. She did get the good routines. We worked our butts off with that kid to make her the best, to win. And she wanted it.
I honestly can understand that it would be hurtful to pour all of your energy into one kid, and I feel like if you gave them such a blessed life, you would be confused why they don't want to be in contact with you anymore. But in fact, I think Maddie was used by grown adults, by an entire production team, to make their show a success. Sure, that may have resulted in Maddie's success, but that is an abusive amount of pressure to place on a child and way too much weight to carry an entire show's success on your shoulders at 9 years old, under the demand that you be perfect and act like an adult at all times when you are just a small child. Abby needs to understand that any financial success or fame she helped create for Maddie does not entitle her to be a part of her future and her personal life outside the show.
You know, when you go into a studio to teach a child that doesn't want to be there, that's looking at the clock all the time, you know it. You know that as a teacher. I get that vibe. Yep. That was not the vibe. That kid would have stayed there till midnight and been back at 7 a.m. if she could. And she never missed class.
Okay, next, let's talk about Sia and her impact on Maddie and the exploitation that she experienced in her life. Because yes, it may look like Sia came and saved Maddie from a dangerous situation, but she also set up Maddie for an even larger stage of exploitation, still at a very young age. So I definitely think that Sia was responsible for a lot of the exploitation that Maddie experienced throughout all of her teen years and her tween years. But in order to talk about Sia, let's rewind all the way back to the beginning, because we kind of just left over that in the beginning. So Maddie Ziegler joined the Abby Lee Dance Company when she was just 4 years old. If you don't know this story, she basically had joined and wanted to take hip-hop, and apparently she took this hip-hop class, and the teacher said that she was doing even better than the other kids in the class. Abby mentions this in her book. And so from there on, they kind of pushed her into learning as much as possible and then competing, taking all the different styles. And apparently she wasn't necessarily an extreme natural talent, but she was somebody that had a God-given gift for work ethic, and she was going to work her butt off to get where she wanted to be, and she had high goals. By 7, she was already racking up national titles and even appearing on Paula Abdul's competition show. She was a standout from the absolute start. Then in 2011, everything changed for her because that's when Dance Mom started. Abby Lee Miller had been in talks with Lifetime to turn the drama of competitive dance moms into a full-blown reality TV series, or at that point like a 6-episode docuseries is what they were told, and that's what they were signing off on, they thought. But the result was a brand new show called Dance Moms. They were originally going to call it Just Dance, I think, but they ended up with Dance Moms. Much better title, in my opinion. And it was only natural that Maddie and her mother would be a part of it, because Maddie was already one of Abby's strongest dancers, especially in her age group, and Abby clearly favored her. And before Maddie was Brooke, but Abby kind of cycles through a favorite and puts all of her energy into that favorite. And I think that she did this even more so when Maddie was on the show, because Maddie represented her entire business on a global and national stage. So I think that she leaned even more into her one golden child. But that's what narcissists do. They always have a golden child. And when Dance Moms premiered, audiences were shocked and hooked. I know I was hooked. Like, I was ready to watch every single Tuesday night. I was tuning in. And the show didn't just highlight the dancing, which was my favorite part. Like, I was always looking forward to the end of the episodes when we could actually see the dancing, and the screaming and arguing could stop for 5 seconds. But the show spotlighted mothers fighting, kids crying, young girls being openly berated in front of the camera, and all of this was framed as normal. It's just a reality of competitive dance, which, if you exist in the competitive dance world anywhere, you know it was not that extreme. But for the first time, viewers got like an unfiltered look at what it meant to be a family in the world of kids' competitive dance. The exhaustion, the obsession with perfection, the constant pressure to win, the stage momager of it all, and the show was an instant hit right off the bat. Overnight, Maddie and the other girls became like miniature celebrities. And then that exploded even more in season 3. But like, as soon as the show aired, they had a cult following already. And people weren't just tuning in for their talent. They were hooked on the over-the-top parents and the moms screaming and arguing with each other, and the cutthroatness of it all. And of course the chaos. But because the show was so big, it naturally attracted attention from other corners of the entertainment industry, including actors and musicians, and other celebrities started watching and even appearing on the show. And one of those viewers was someone nobody expected, especially Maddie, the elusive hit songwriter and future pop icon. At that point, she was already kind of an icon, but her fame definitely multiplied once she started working with Maddie, and that is Sia. Before Sia ever laid eyes on Maddie, she was already one of the most powerful songwriters in the music industry. She'd built a reputation for unusual melodies, emotional lyrics, and songs that painted vivid cinematic scenes. And like, she was, I would say, the most extremely emotional, not just in the songs for herself, but in like everything that she wrote for other pop stars. And if you don't know the history of Sia, like, pretty much all of your favorite pop songs from all of your favorite pop stars are written by Sia, or at least she might be one of the songwriters on them. But over the years, she wrote and performed tracks that quietly circulated in the indie and alt-pop world, but her mainstream turning point came when her song Breathe Me was used in the series finale of 6 Feet Under, and the exposure gave her like a surge of attention and set her career in motion. But behind the scenes, things were unraveling for Sia. Like, fame made her deeply uncomfortable, and she'd already tried having a music career and being public about it first, but she's always been uncomfortable with the fame aspect and all of the attention, so she kind of leaned into songwriting for other artists instead, and plus songwriting is where all of the money is in music. But touring and performing live pushed her into like relying on alcohol and then other substances, we'll just say, just to cope with the anxiety and the expectations of being a live performer. And so over time, she became dependent on pills and alcohol and her mental health just completely spiraled out of control, completely deteriorated, and she's since been open about struggling with depression and self-exiting thoughts and addiction, and she included a self-exit attempt that she talked about, which happened around 2010. She's been completely open about all of this, but even as her personal life was falling apart, her artistic reputation continued to, like, climax. And by 2010, she had released several studio albums under her own name and face, but the traditional, like, pop star lifestyle was suffocating her. She didn't want to tour endlessly and smile through promo cycles or be recognizable everywhere she went, so she made the decision that she would step away from being a front-facing artist and focus on the part that she loved the most, which was just the writing. And like I said, that's where all the money is. But that choice changed everything for her, because when Sia pivoted to writing for other artists, she quickly became the secret weapon behind a long list of pop hits. One of the biggest turning points for her was Titanium. I am titanium. She wrote the song and recorded a demo, originally intending it for another artist, but the track ended up being released with her own demo vocals left on it, and she apparently did not expect this to explode the way that it did. But it did explode, and Titanium became a massive global hit for her. I think this is like one of the most played songs on the radio of all time, probably. But suddenly Sia's name was everywhere, like on charts, in studios, in conversations with music executives. She was writing for superstars already and shaping the sound of mainstream pop from the shadows. And that was the key. She found a way to be, like, enormously successful while staying mostly out of the spotlight, like Hannah Montana. Honestly, it sounds like a dream, but no talk shows, no flashy persona, no endless touring, just the music. And honestly, isn't that the dream for, like, most musicians, to be known for your music and not because of, like, your body, and the outfits you wear on stage? But I'm rambling. Of course, labels and industry wanted more from her at this point, and they didn't just want Sia the songwriter, they wanted Sia the artist, something that they could package up for people to consume. And that tension eventually led to the persona we recognize today of the woman with, like, the oversized wigs, or like a backwards wig, hidden face, and the very public commitment to privacy, even though we've obviously known what Sia looks like for years at this point, but she still would rather remain faceless whenever she can. And Sia essentially invented a way to be famous while staying visually anonymous. It's like she combined, like, that Lady Gaga-esque kind of visual, but also, like, not showing her face. And honestly, especially being at her age and how ageist the pop music industry is, especially towards women, honestly, this is probably the best move that she could have made for her own success, and capital success anyways. And when she decided to return to releasing music as an artist, she needed something or someone to stand in for her on screen, especially if she didn't want to show her face. And that's where Maddie comes in. Because, like, at this point, she had become a self-proclaimed television addict, and she's talked about spending most of her time at home watching reality TV, which is not really something I would expect for her, but that's what she says. And to the point where she even sent money to a contestant on Survivor for keeping a chicken alive. Like, okay, so we're not talking casual viewer, we're talking, like, die-hard superfan. And at the same time as the Survivor chicken incident, Dance Moms was one of Lifetime's biggest shows, and Maddie was obviously the breakout star. And Sia watched Maddie dance on the show, and she was, like, awestruck by her. So the combination of technical skill and emotional expression in such a young kid moved her to tears. And honestly, that's how I felt about Maddie as well, and also Chloe. And so I guess Sia, having that perspective, seemed relatable, but if a child performing highly commercial choreography could still evoke that kind of emotional reaction, she thought there's definitely something there. So Sia did what any plugged-in celebrity would do in 2014. She reached out publicly. And she contacted Maddie via Twitter and through her mom, asking if Maddie would play Sia in a music video for her new single, Chandelier. And Maddie was, like, 11 at the time. And she didn't fully grasp who Sia was, but she knew that she was a pop star, and she assumed that it was definitely something fake. But she found out that she was wrong and thought, okay, maybe she wants to cast me as like part of the ensemble, or maybe just a background dancer, like a group of kids. But instead she walked onto a set and discovered the video would center entirely on her, like no backup dancers, no big cast. I don't think there was anyone else in the chandelier video, honestly, just Maddie, a wig, and like a bare, almost empty, like abandoned, seedy looking apartment building. Nobody involved could have predicted what happened next. Except for me, because I always predicted that Maddie would be a giant star. And so she was. Chandelier didn't just do well, it became like a cultural moment overnight. The video racked up tens of millions of views, and then hundreds of millions of views, and people were mesmerized by this tiny little intense barefoot child with a wig with like raw, almost feral, like animal energy, dancing around in a dirty leotard. It was hypnotic, unsettling, and unforgettable to say the least. But for Sia, it was the perfect solution to all of her problems of not wanting to be public, but still wanting to be successful. And the public got a recognizable visual avatar to associate with her music, but she didn't have to be physically present in like a traditional pop star kind of way. And so for Maddie, it was absolute rocket fuel to her career, because Maddie was already the breakout star of Dance Moms and super successful, and now she's getting all of the visual attention from Sia's entire brand. So her fame exploded far beyond the Dance Moms bubble. She was suddenly doing talk shows, red carpets, and high-profile performances that didn't even reference Dance Moms. She was labeled Sia's muse, and her image became inseparable from Sia's brand, and that connection only deepened. But so did the exploitation. So let's talk about how that partnership intensified. After Sia saw the success of Chandelier using Maddie, she continued using Maddie as the physical stand-in for her artistic persona for the rest of her career. They collaborated on more videos, including Elastic Heart, which had a huge backlash from the public, and Big Girls Cry, and performed together on massive stages like the Grammys and Saturday Night Live. Maddie's life transformed almost overnight from reality TV kid to global pop culture figure internationally. And their relationship also became a lot more personal. Sia became a trusted adult in Maddie's life, not just a director or boss, but a mentor. Over time, she took on a parental role, even becoming Maddie's godmother with her mother Melissa's blessing, so that I think Sia could take her on her own without Melissa having to be there as a chaperone. Oh no, that's my thoughts. But Sia showered Maddie with attention, protection, and gifts, reportedly even paying for full-time security because she claims she felt responsible for the level of fame that Maddie was experiencing and that it wouldn't be safe. So she hired full-on security for her, and she later bought Maddie her first car and has described feeling deeply bonded to her. On paper, it sounds like a fairy tale. A world-class artist discovers a young talent, protects her, uplifts her, and turns her into a star. But if you look a little closer, the power imbalance becomes more obvious and a little more concerning. Sia was nearly 40 years old, and Maddie was barely even a teenager. Like, she wasn't a teenager when they first started working together. And I'm like, if people are gonna say that this is super cutesy, wootsy, and just harm-free and innocent, then at the same time say that Michael Jackson was like the biggest predator of all time, the standard is doubled if we're going to say that one is totally okay and the other is not, because Sia's relationship with Maddie looked a lot like a lot of Michael Jackson's relationships with children, and regardless of whether Michael Jackson was an actual predator towards those children or not, doesn't matter, the power imbalance is still there. And one of them had years of life experience and industry knowledge and control, so in those situations like Sia or Michael, and the other was a child who had been raised in a culture where saying no rarely felt like an option, like Macaulay Culkin or Maddie Ziegler. Not that Macaulay Culkin has ever accused Michael Jackson of anything. In fact, Macaulay Culkin, protects and defends Michael, but just saying. There's a power dynamic there. And let's talk about, the Big Girls Cry music video and why that whole era was a red flag. Well, during the era of their early videos, there were already small but telling signs of how this dynamic worked between Sia and Maddie. Promotional material around Big Girls Cry emphasized that Sia cared about Maddie's comfort on set and encouraged her to speak up if anything felt too much On the surface, that sounds responsible and thoughtful. But when you really think about it, placing the burden on a 12-year-old to identify and verbalize when something is inappropriate or emotionally overwhelming, especially after coming from the environment of dance moms where you could never say no, regardless of whether you felt something was inappropriate or overwhelming, and you were conditioned and trained to just say yes anyways, and now you're working with this giant pop star, that's a lot to put on a child, especially for a kid who comes from a high-pressure competitive dance background, who's built her entire identity on being the best and being the favorite and being, like, subservient and obedient, and has been taught that pushing through discomfort is part of success and that telling somebody no is not an option. So telling a child that you have to tell me when you can't handle it is almost setting them up to never say anything at all. It quietly shifts responsibility away from the adult making creative decisions and onto the child who's trying not to disappoint anyone. This pattern, Sia framing herself as a protective while still placing Maddie into intense adult-themed projects, becomes crucial when we get to Sia's film, because that's the most controversial part of their relationship is the movie music. And music spanned like the entire duration of Maddie and Sia's relationship. So if you're not familiar with music, let's get into it. So as Maddie was like leaving the show and leaning more into acting, Sia was working on a new passion project, which was going to be her directorial debut, and it's a movie film called Music. So from the beginning, there was a huge problem baked into this premise. The main character was an autistic, nonverbal teenage girl, and Sia kind of wants her to represent herself, and Sia wanted that character to be played by Maddie, who is not autistic, or at least not publicly autistic. I have my own suspicions, but that's neither here nor there because the character Music is supposed to be a highly disabled autistic person, whereas even if, say, and I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but let's say hypothetically that Maddie did have autism. If Maddie does have autism, she has a very high functioning, a very high ability level of autism because she is able to perform at a very high level and to be working in social dynamics and very complex social dynamics that involve a high level of socialization. So if per se that she is autistic, because I'm not going to say that there's no chance, like she was the golden child dance prodigy of a television show, so clearly she had a special interest, but she would be very, very high functioning on the spectrum of autism if she were to be autistic. So with that out of the way, the character Music was nothing like that. She was not somebody that was supposed to be high functioning. She needs a full-time aide. And Sia wanted that character to be played by Maddie.
So Sia releases this movie about an autistic character. So let's see who the main character is. What autistic actor did you hire to be this character? There are tons of autistic actors out there. I wonder, is this a new autistic actor that we haven't really heard of yet? Is this someone that we already know? Like, what's going on? And then you get the preview, the trailer, and it is Maddie Ziegler, who is not autistic. And also, if you're saying that anyone can act autistic, it's just acting, you need to recognize your own ableism there. And why you think that autistics are not good enough at being autistic on their own, that they need to fit your level of what autism looks like, and they need to perform to what you know.
And initially the movie was conceived as a small, non-musical film with a modest budget, but once it was reimagined and it was imagined as a full-on musical project, the budget ballooned and the stakes went up. Suddenly this wasn't just an indie experiment, it was a high-profile Sia vehicle with major studio interest and a controversial charity organization, Autism Speaks, involved at one stage in the process. And if you're familiar at all with the autism community hates Autism Speaks. They are not a good support system or a good charity organization in terms of actually representing what autism is and the support that people with autism actually need. So the fact that they were tied to a super public film about autism just did not sit well with people at all either. Now, the film blends, or kind of tries to blend, real-life scenes with stylized musical numbers inside the main character's imagination. And Maddie's character music is portrayed with exaggerated facial expressions, repetitive